All right. Well, this is a workshop on sort of blues and how it fits bluegrass, how you inject blues in. I have sort of a different approach. This is not exactly if you were to, let's say, buy a blues book, how they would teach you about blues, but it's sort of my approach that sort of fits bluegrass, I think, a little bit better. And I kind of think of sort of two ways to bluesify, you might say, bluegrass, and that is sort of make the melody a little bluesier. The other is to just leave the melody behind and just play blues notes, and we'll kind of talk about how all that works. So does everybody have handouts? Did you get handouts from Peter, I think? Okay. So if you want to follow along, the first thing we would be looking at is putting the blues and bluegrass guitar right at the top there, and the G, what I call G blues moves. Other people might say G blues scale, but like I say, I'm sort of using a little bit different approach. So I don't use the word scale because I'm just doing things a little different here, skipping some notes that you might not normally see skipped, and leaving some notes in that you might not normally see left in. So guess we'll kind of just start by talking about just sort of the general scale. If I were to play a G scale, we have that kind of a sound, but if we want to make things bluesy, blues is really about flatting notes. And so what we're going to do is add in a flatted third. So in other words, 1, 2, there's 3, but if we flat that, and so the first thing that we're going to do a little different is we're going to leave in the regular third, and we're just going to add the flatted third to what we're doing. There you hear that sound of the 3 and the flat 3. You might hear it back and forth. Bluegrass kind of thing. That's why we're leaving the major third in. So a blues third is the same as a minor third. Okay, and then as we go up the scale, so we now have 2 thirds. And then what we're going to do to sort of make up for that is we're going to skip the 2. And we're going to go right to the flat third, regular third, and then we're going to have this chromatic passage where we play 4, and then we're going to add in flat 5, and we're going to keep regular 5, which is typical, but we get this sort of chromatic area here where we're doing all half steps. Then we're going to skip 6, and we're going to play flat 7. So you can think of that as the regular 7 flatted, or you can think of it as adding a flat 7 and skipping a 7. I sort of think of it kind of as an altered 7 to flat 7. So it's, and the reason I have it descending here, now that we've kind of gone through this, is I think it's easier to get a feel for this starting from the top and moving down. So if I play what I have here, the G blues moves descending, now I'm going to do a really odd thing. I am going to switch the order of the flat 3 and the 3. And I'm going to play the flat 3 first. And then I'm going to go up. And then you just keep going. Now we're just doing a second octave of that. So here's what that sounds like. Your kind of quintessential sort of bluegrassy blues moves, blues-ish scale. So the things that are probably the most unorthodox thing is like, why are you skipping the second note of the scale? Well, you hear that note, it's not a wrong note, that's the A note that we're skipping, but it sort of disrupts that bluesy, like the note, I don't really like. Same thing with the 6. It's like, it's just less bluesy. So the A note, which is the 2, the E note, which is the 6, we're going to skip. Just looking make sure we got no questions yet. So what you want to do to sort of get these notes under your fingers, what I like to have students do is just add a few strings. For example, if I just did the first 2 strings there, if you take in information better with the fingerboard thing here, you could do it that way, or just look at the notes in the tablature or the music. We have that. If we add the 3rd string in, and you just want to learn to improvise those notes and make them very natural for your fingers. You don't have to, when we're doing this and we have that funny little out of sequence, we're descending but we're skipping and then coming back up. You don't actually have to do that all the time. It's just such a normal move. But you might stick on the higher notes first, kind of get, 4 strings or so of the G blues. Just get to your fingers. And I'm just randomly going here. There's no order. If there's an order, you might say that I do tend to reverse that order of, when I'm descending. Are you guys all sitting with guitars right now? Nod your head up and down. So you might want to just right now try that. We could, if I were just to do the chords, and you could be this. Maybe do like 3 strings worth of, if you're reading the tablature or just that fingerboard or whatever, and just sort of get a feel for it. It's pretty easy. Start anywhere. You can put any note on the beat. It's a really, you might say, a forgiving way to do all this. Let's talk a little bit to just back up and do like kind of a non-blues topic. And that is that scales are just a regular major scale. They're a little bit inherently non-musical. And what I mean by that is, if you know a G scale really well, that doesn't mean you can play over a G chord. It's not good enough to just know your scales, especially in bluegrass. And I've had many a student say, it's weird. I know my G scale perfectly, but I just can't improvise even when there's a G chord. And there's a reason for that, and that is that how the chord tones land on the beat is really important. So when you could think of the resolution of notes in bluegrass as 1/8 notes. At least that's the way I like to teach it. That would make a measure go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and when I play a scale, the 1, 2, 3, 4 are the beat notes, the ands are the offbeat notes. Now, if I want to make it sound like that G scale is fitting my chord perfectly, then I try to mostly align chord tones. You cannot mistake that what I just did there fits over a G chord. If I did this, it doesn't sound like it fits that chord. And why is it? I used only notes of the G scale there, and yet it's just sounded like it was ill-fitted to the chord, and that's because I put all the non-chord tones on the downbeat. This sounds like a D, even though they're notes of a G chord, because that fits a D, that fits a D, that fits a D, and so I feel like it's important for you to sort of back up a little bit and understand that how chord tones land in a normal scale is really important. It's very unforgiving, and that's why you have to sort of learn how to line up scale notes to the chord. Does that make sense to everybody? So if I play, sounds like a C, sounds like a G. Okay, so why am I bringing that up? Because the cool thing about blues is it's extremely forgiving that way. It's when I do this, I don't really care about any of that. It actually, that very fact makes improvising in blues like 5 times easier than improvising when you're not using blues. So it's just kind of a cool thing. So yeah, when I do this, you'll never get a sense, no matter how I line these up, that it's anything but that. I don't think I could figure out a way to make you think I'm not fitting the chord, unlike a major scale. So I think that's important to remember. So, and that's what makes, most people learning to improvise have much more success when they start with blues and doing it that way. So now and there's kind of 2 things about this. So I thought I'd use Fireball Mail. I think you should have that in your handouts. And I did write out a melody solo. This is not really particularly bluesy song. For those of you who maybe don't know the song, I'll render you a little bit of it. Here she comes, let her go. There she goes, heating the cold. Watch her fly, look at her side. Let her by, Fireball Mail. So, where's the starting point? Well, I make all my students learn how to play melody. So that was Fireball Mail, but that didn't really have any blues in it, and that's totally fine. We don't need to always have blues in our bluegrass. But, starting with Bill Monroe. Bill Monroe grew up, and there was a guitar player, African-American guitar player named Arnold Schultz, who he hung around, and it just infused Bill Monroe with blues. And as the father of bluegrass music, so he took all these mandolin solos, and fiddle players started putting their blues in their solo. Even Earl Scruggs' banjo has this sort of little bluesy element to it. Guitar players were very late to the scene in bluegrass for taking solos, and it's really Clarence White that sort of started injecting blues, because fiddle tunes and things don't really have that much blues in them, and mostly prior to Clarence, bluegrass guitar players, well, what we think of as bluegrass, Doc Watson, Norman Blake, people like that, they were sort of started out just sort of playing these fiddle tunes, and they were very kind of non-bluesy. And then Clarence came along, and then later Tony Rice, and they just like Bill Monroe, they injected a lot of blues into their solos. And let me play a little bit of this Fireball Mail that I wrote up. So I'm going to get away from the melody a little bit just to get more blues in it. But I'm also, when I'm playing the melody, I'm trying to make it just a little bluesier. Just doing that little, and then this run. Now here, da-da-da, on the second line, I'm just leaving it behind. But arriving at the melody at the very end note. And notice my D run has that note in it. It's a blues note, even that note. Back to the melody, then leaving it. Then a little end run. So once I get started in these runs, it's more about sort of ending where the melody ends, but the whole run is just a random set of those notes from the G blues moves, and it's not very particular how you play them. Then the other thing that we need to know is what these chord progressions, how does that affect all that we're doing? Right now, we've only learned G blues, And you might wonder, well, what's going to happen when the D chord comes in this song? And here's another cool thing about blues, is it's even in the same way that it's forgiving in how these notes fit, downbeats or offbeats, how it fits over the G chord, it's also pretty darn forgiving when the chords change. It still kind of sounds magically like it fits. And a regular major scale won't fit at all. If you're just playing the G scale and you fit the downbeats to a G and then the D chord comes, you have to totally adjust that scale so that the chord tones start fitting a D. But blues doesn't care for some reason. I don't even really know exactly why it doesn't care, but it's, you know, it's sort of like, wow, that's really weird. I'm going to see if this works. I'm going to play Fireball Mel rhythm track here. And hopefully you guys will hear this, and then I'm just going to solo over it a little bit, and I'm going to try as best I can to just play only these G blues moves notes. I'm not going to go do any adjustment for the D chord, and then you can sort of be the judge of how, you know, whether that fits or not. Oh, hang on, a little technical difficulty. My thing disconnected from my speaker. Bluetooth on. Bose. Tested before I got on here and it was all connected. Sitting here trying to connect. Connection unsuccessful. Make sure it is turned on and in range. Well, it's sitting right next to me. And I swear I had it totally connected and I have no idea why it would all of a sudden not want to. But I could get my iPad maybe right next to the... I'm going to try one more time. Connection unsuccessful. Well, what do you know? Best laid plans. Well, hopefully this will still work if you get enough. Whoops. Tell me if you can hear when I get the right song. I could move this closer too. You probably hear this okay. Is that coming out? I'll turn it up louder. Okay, we'll just have to go with that for right now. Give you a little melody here so you can hear the song. Okay, did that backup track come through there somewhat? Okay, all right. So anyway, that was me sort of demonstrate. I was trying to, when the D chord came, I just kept the G blues going, and it kind of magically works. So it's kind of a cool thing about blues. So not only do you not have to, it's much more flexible chord tone wise and all that. You don't need to care about getting started on certain chord tones and things like that. So it just works. And so all you have to do then is get this one sequence of notes. And again, you don't have to play all 6 strings worth of it. You can see there, mostly I stayed in those higher notes. And but try to get maybe 4 strings worth. It's a little awkward on the 5th string because you got this, that's where that chromatic. So it's kind of a little bit of a handful down there, but it plays really well. again, all I'm just, watch my fingers just doing this. I don't even know where I am in the song right now, but I heard a D chord. Okay. But anyway, so there you are. That would be, and all I'm just doing is running these eighth notes randomly, sort of up and down. And, and then I would recommend trying to infuse some melody. Maybe now for this line. Back to melody. I'm not looking at any sheet or anything. And really common for that last line. So you see how easy that was to just get that going there for something like Fireball Mal? Okay. This is so different because usually in these kind of classes I'm having students, participate and play a little bit. But now, does anybody have any questions? How about we just open it for a question if anyone has a question?
Jack, there's a question for you in the chat from Dick.
Is this blues fit for 4-chord? Oh, that's a very, very good question. Is it fit for the 4-chord and the 5-chord? Well, so happens that I brought Bury Me Beneath the Willow, which is a 3-chord song. And so let's just move on to that song, and we will try to figure that out. And the short answer is, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. For me, it's the same. Although I will say one thing: this open B string is, if you could pick a note that might not fit, especially if you play it very much, it would be that B string. So when we're coming, so that note, wah, that's not a great, especially a blues note over the C chord. So you may pass through, and now you could actually skip that note. So, and that's would be the major 7 of a C chord. So, but I'm gonna pull up. Let's see. Hopefully this works okay. I'm gonna pull up "Bury Me Beneath the Willow." So anyway, here let's just do a little bit of this song. I'm gonna do the same thing where I sing a little bit of it, get it in everybody's head. So this song is "Bury Me the willow under weeping willow tree, so she will know where I lie sleeping, then perhaps she'll weep for me." Now I'm going to play the melody. Play the little blues solo written out. Okay, so now, so this is just using a 3-chord version. Let's use this soundtrack, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm just gonna improvise a little bit over it. I'm gonna go in and out of melody, but I'm gonna try as best I can to just keep this G blues going, and I'm gonna try not to adjust anything for the C chord and not adjust anything for the D chord. Maybe I'll even throw those B's in over the C chord, and we'll see just how bad that is. So here we go. Hopefully you can hear this. There's the C. There's the D. There's the B. A little bit of melody. Back to blues. Back to melody. Back to melody. Okay, so there was a point there toward the end where over that C chord I stuck that B in, and it actually, I don't think it sounded too bad. So even the B, you know, if you use it in the right way, but pretty much those were only G blues moves. I was just randomly playing them. I let the chords flow right underneath, and if you get good at playing melody, you get good at these sequences of G blues moves, you can get one heck of a lot out of this. So I know of no easier way to start getting in sort of to the improvising thing. The hard part, to be honest, you know, for where a lot of my students are anyway, is just getting super good at playing melodies, just being able to track them. And sometimes that's just because people don't spend enough time just playing melody. So, but you could hear sort of how effective it is for me to sort of come and go. I'm less a big fan of total improvising all the time through these songs. So even though, you know, this is a great way to improvise and it's a great way to practice and everything, for me, I would prefer people to sort of go in and out of melody and inject this blues like this. But it's a very effective way of, and I think it's an easy way to get started on the path to non-melody oriented improvising. So, you know, melody oriented improvising to me is just playing with the melody. There's me having fun with the melody, and that's really important skill too. So that's one step beyond, hey, I'm really good at because I made it more interesting. But you know, sometimes we get tired of just stating the melody all the time. See that last line. Okay. Hopefully that answers the 4 chord. So the answer is yes, the 4 chord. I'm going to pull up one more song to demonstrate. I always like to use Blue Ridge Cabin Home, which goes 1 for 2 measures, 4 for 2 measures, 5 for 2 measures. Let's just see what sort of total improv this is. There's a well-beaten path on this old mountainside where I wandered when I was a lad. That's all the song goes all the way through. 1 for 2 measures, 4. So if we have that now that it's in your head a little bit. There's the C chord, G, D. Melody back in your head. C, D. Okay, does that make sense to everybody what's going on there? Just a 1, a 4, and a 5, and I just stayed on the G blues moves. Okay, but having said that, how about if we actually want to switch? So if we set these same notes to the C chord, in other words, the same flat 3 added in, skipping, so we go 1, skip 2, play flat 3, 3, 4, flat 5, 5, skip 6, flat 7, back to 1. So that's the C, you know, we're just going to do that over the C. We see it here in C blues moves, if you have that page in front of you. Same thing where when we go downhill, we're going to reverse. So now we have a little more flexibility because it actually sounds quite nice, as you might expect, when the C chord comes. If you can adjust to the C chord, you just got some more options. You got some more cool notes. It's a little bluesier over the C. It sounds a little like a tighter fit, but it's kind of cool that you can stay in G, play these blues notes, or you can, if once you've learned your C blues moves, if we kind of started from here and go down, you know, and learn those sort of. Then that just gives us that more flexibility. So what I would do is, you know, spend a fair bit of time with G blues, start practicing improvising, see what it feels like over the C chord, over the D chord. And by the way, I should point out, you just can't use G blues over all chords. If you, let's say you're playing a song and it goes to an A chord, forget the G blues over the A chord. That's just it doesn't work over all chords. It happens to work very well over the 1, the 4, and the 5. So don't push it too far. I'm seeing a question about will sevenths work? And I'm not sure. We're playing a flat 7, so whoever, I think it's Roger, maybe a little more expansive on that. So we're doing the, so let's say we're doing G blues. There's our, and maybe I know what the question is sort of like, do we have to always skip the 7s? Well, the 7 is in the scale. So, you know, we don't have to play blues and entirely stick with blues. We can go in and out of blues. And that, in a sense, when I'm switching in and out of melody, unless I'm sort of bluesifying the melody, I'm sort of back in the major scale in a way. And certainly if the melody traveled to this F sharp note, which is frequently will, it's a well-beaten path on this whole mountainside where I want. So there's an F sharp note. It's part of the melody of the song. So in the situation where it goes to the F sharp in this case, you don't have to leave it behind. Of course, it's sort of doing it as it gets to the D chord there, or it's really right before the D chord, where I want. But any of these, let's call them skip notes, the 2, the 6, the major 7, I don't really think of as a skip note as much as I think of it as an altered. In other words, we're flatting the 7. Maybe let's say we call it a skip note. So we have these 3 skip notes. They're only skip notes because we're in this kind of heavy blues mode. But we don't have to stay in the heavy blues mode all the time. So, and if we're dialing back in some melody, then you go where the melody goes. There's an A note. There's another A note. So when I played melody, I was playing A notes because the melody went to the A notes, and it's not a wrong note. It's only a little disruptive to your blues sound when you're doing this kind of. You can hear that note. It's like, what's that doing in there? It's bluesy, but it's not a wrong note. So don't confuse a skip note with it necessarily being wrong. Hopefully I answered that question of the 7. So there's another thing we can do with this 7, and you may see, I may have accidentally done it, but we can go like this. We can pass through the root. There's the major 7, which is a skip note. But if you do this, so now I'm doing this chromatic passage down, and so that's the way to get the major 7 in, usually if you're working your way to this note. So in that case, if when you're doing the G blues, you could play around a little bit with instead of going like this, you could go. But that's just using it as this passing note. So for those who want to add in, there it is possible to do other things than what are just these notes. But these are sort of the notes that especially fit, and they'll fit over the 3 chords and all that. So hopefully that answered maybe the 7th. I assume that meant a major 7th because the flat 7 is part of what we're doing. So yeah. So maybe let me try to demonstrate. Let me go back to Bury Me Beneath a Willow, and what I'm going to do this time, oops, I lost it. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to try to reconfigure my C and get a little C blues moves when the C chord comes, and then when the D chord comes, we haven't really done the C, but if we start from the top on down, and realize by learning extra, so here's what we know. We know that we learned the G blues and we could play over 3 chords if we want to, don't have to. We learned the C blues, well of course we can play over 3 chords too. They would be C, F, and G because that's the 3 chords of C, because everything transposes. And so, and then if you learn the D blues, you have blues for the D, G, and A chords, the 3 chords in the key of D. So you're getting the ability to play blues over in 3 different keys if you learn these 3 blues moves, which is to say you're getting 5 chords of blues, sort of the 2 at the other ends that don't quite fit, if that makes sense. Like if you have D blues, then you can kind of play that over the A chord. If you have C blues, you can play that over the F chord, and we've already learned the C, the G, and the D directly. So those 3 blues moves will get you the ability to sort of play blues over 3 keys, which is a total of 5 chords. Does that make sense? That could be a little confusing. Could you play Happy Birthday in blues? What? That's kind of a funny idea. Is that me playing Happy Birthday for myself? That's funny. Okay, so let's go back, sidetrack here. But so Bury Me Beneath the Willow, and I will attempt to sort of switch over into some C blues and then D blues when the D chord comes. C blues, G blues, D, G, C, D. So, some of it is just a matter of sort of figuring out the notes. For example, this is a skip note in G blues, but D kind of a big note because it is part of a D chord, so. And then the C. So you see how, the homework for you, and there's a lot on just these 2 pages here of blues moves, because what you want to do, what I would do is start with the G blues, because we play in G the most. Just run that thing and then start playing songs and run that G blues, and you'll know it's time to move on and add in maybe the C blues when your mind can kind of separate from what you're doing and you have this sort of automatic pilot, which is why I can do a little bit of this while I'm talking to you. By the way, I sometimes like to add this third, flat 3-3. Because I didn't give you the up the neck notes, but that flat thing about the flat third is such a blues thing that if you want to add those extra 2 notes into what I've written out. So get the G blues intuitive. It's the word I like to use. Music always needs to be intuitive, because we can't be analyzing our notes as we're playing. We have to practice them into that intuitive thing where our fingers just somehow magically go there. But when you get to that point and you can sort of play a standard 3-chord song and you kind of make it sound like this blues is all working, then move into the C or D, whichever one you sort of want to go into next. And then I would just stick with the key of G and then see how instinctive it is to adjust for the chords, because this is a different process. We've just kind of learned this way of playing where we don't adjust our scale to the chords and figured out it kind of works. But then all of a sudden now, when you start getting the feel for C blues moves, you adjust. So you could just spend some time adjusting, just what I did there. Every time the C chord came, I tried to switch into this, and then when the D chord comes, switch into that. I think one of the things, I think the G blues fitting all 3 chords is fine, but the longer it stays on a chord, the more, to me, you start exposing the fact that it doesn't fit. I always like using Katie Daly with students because it's this 2-chord song, but it goes to the 5 chord and it stays there forever. So this Katie Daly goes like this. With her old man she came from Temporary in the pioneering days of 42. So now it goes to this D chord. Her old man was shot in Tombstone City for the making of the good old Mountain Dew. That's the whole song right there. But that was, I think, 6 measures of D. And if you're playing G blues, now that's not the most common thing in the world to go to D, go to the 5 chord for 6 measures. But if you've only learned G blues moves, that 6 measures of D to me is just a little too G-ish for that long. So some of this is, you would think like music either fits or it doesn't, but this is sort of gets in the gray area for how long can you play G's blues over a D chord. Turns out you can kind of get going for a measure, 2 measures, not too bad. 6 measures, I for sure would have this instinct of, I got to get my D blues moving. I got to get with her in the pioneering days of 42. Now, I could be and do that, but let's face it, if you get that's just gonna sound better. Here's my D. So there, you heard me shift into D blues mode over that D chord. And again, the 6 measures of D is just too long, in my opinion, to be playing G blues over. But it's kind of cool that it's, that there's this sort of variable G blues over a C and a D chord kind of works until there's just too much of it, and then that's why you do need to do your homework and learn all these, learn any key you're going to play over, learn these blues moves to fit the chords. So any other questions? There must be questions. There's always questions. Nod your head if this all seems like, enlightening, this is cool stuff. I think I can make this work. Okay. Do this if it feels like, this was a lot. This is like confusing to me. Is anyone sort of confused at some low level? No? Not really? Okay. Looking for your Bluegrass book. Where? Well, you can go to my website and get my books. I do have a book that I haven't really put out. It's sort of in the vein of this class. It's called Beyond Melody, Improvising for Bluegrass Guitar. It's not on my website because I never felt it was quite finished, and I do need to sort of, maybe this class will propel me to fatten the book, put a little more stuff in. But it's kind of ideas of improvising, including how the scale fits the chord, like we started out talking about early on here, where how you make a scale more musical, how you line up chord tones. So the book has that kind of stuff. It has this blues information in it, and other stuff, including sort of expanding around the neck. So, but I don't really have that book. The main book I have that I sell a lot of these days is the Bluegrass Guitar Primer, and then I have a second book, which is the Bluegrass Guitar Collection. But they're on my website. You can find them there. You can get them either in PDF or a physical book. So, where are we time-wise? We're getting pretty close. So, anybody have any? I love your tracks on your website too. Oh, play. Yeah, I have a bazillion MP3 tracks from all my books and everything is up there. So, any tricks for playing blues mode up the neck? Well, the trick is so I teach up the neck what's called the caged position. The caged position, the C, A, G, E, and D, what do those chords have in common? They're the major chords that have open strings. So the caged position is mentally barring, like the one I played up here is what we would call C in caged, because you play a C with these 3 fingers, you do this, and you learn your major scale. So what do? Well, we do our G blues moves. Lo and behold, I now can play a 3-chord song right here because I learned my G blues moves. It's all, it's how it is. So you, whatever cage you're going to play out of, you have to track down your blues moves. Remember, this has the same 7 distinct notes that a major scale has. So we haven't added, in overall, we've added notes and we subtracted notes. We did the same number. So we threw out 3 notes and we brought in 3 new notes. I think that's right. The flat 3, the flat 5, the flat 7 are added in, and then we threw out the 7, the 6, and the 2. So all these, so that's how that would be. Whoops. So, you know, it's a it's a bunch more work now, but you know, start down here where things are easier to find your way around, where you have now these handouts for. But you know, this would be way over the topic that we're going to do here. But in theory, any of the cage positions have a blues that fits over the top of it, and it's your job to learn it. I have taught a class called Caged Guitar, and we did add blues to each of the caged positions. It gets a little messy. It's just more to learn, but it's from a music theory standpoint, there's nothing different. You're just playing the same notes we've already talked about. And again, you get a lot out of it because you can, you know, it's flexible over the 4 and the 5 chords. So that's a kind of a cool thing about it. Any other questions? Any other thing? Yeah, so just kind of recap. Take a song. There's a well-beaten path down this old mountainside. Start with the melody. Somebody says they can't hear me. Is that true? You hear me? So I'm just taking that head out all day long to the place I call home in those blue ridge hills far away. Play some melody, blues. Gonna go to C blues, D. So a little some combination of getting some melody infused with some of these blues things, but you have to do your homework. You have to get those under your fingers. Start with G, play around with 3 chords over G, start getting it, add in C, add in D, and now start shifting. And then it's all good. The world just wide open for how you can fit that over all the chords. And I see Peter's here. Do you have anything to say, Peter? Or are you just stopping by telling us we have to quit? Any more questions? Okay. Yeah, so take that work. Oh, by the way, I did stick up, I recorded the 2 handouts that have the blues versions of Bury Me Beneath the Willow and Fireball Melt are on my website. If you go to the guitar page on my website and then scroll down toward the bottom, you will have audio files if you just need to hear the tablature, in case you don't read tablature very well or something. You can follow along with I think a fairly slow recording of me playing those solos for you. I didn't do the melody ones, but I put the blues ones up there on my website. So those audio files are there for you. All righty. Well, I think anyone camping at Grass Valley this next week? Is that this coming weekend? I'm in Illinois right now, so I won't be there, but that sounds like a really good time. I heard that it was all full in a waiting list, and so you can't just show up and attend the informal campground sort of thing. So that's what I know about it. Is there is something happening at Grass Valley, very informal for jamming, but they filled up the spots or something. So you check into that. I'm sure on Facebook you can find out more. Okay, and I think we were supposed to get off right at 3:15, so far as I know. So thank you all. This was fun class to teach.